Welcome to today's episode of the Purdue ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers podcast, which aims to provide an outlet for not only Purdue students, but all students, learners, and aspiring professionals around the world to learn from experienced professionals in the field of engineering and beyond. I am your co-host, Liam Kaufman, and joining me today is my fellow co-host, Agathea Theron. And I'll have Aggie introduce our highly respected guest today.
Joining us on today's episode is current President of Purdue University, Mitch Daniels. Before leading as President of Purdue University for over 12 years, President Daniels was elected Governor of Indiana in 2004 and reelected in 2008. He was also the Director of the Office of Management and Budget under President George W. Bush's cabinet and a senior aide to President Ronald Reagan. Furthermore, he worked in the private sector as Senior Vice President at Eli Lilly and Company, Indiana's largest corporation. He is a graduate of the Woodrow School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University and has a JD from Georgetown University Law Center. He is also the author of the books Keeping the Republic, Saving America by Trusting Americans, as well as Aiming Higher, Words That Change the State. President Daniels, we couldn't be more excited and thankful for you to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So just getting into things, as everyone just heard, you have quite the background, the political background in specific. And we'd like to hear a little bit about how that political background shaped how you are as a leader and president today.
I'm going to start by saying it was not the most important part. I am grateful for the opportunities I had working in and around government and public life, but the longest stretch that I spent anywhere was in private life, running first of all a mid-sized contract research company, essentially, and then of course working at a large corporation, as Aggie mentioned. And I would say the most important lessons I learned were learned there. I applied those to public life as opposed to the other way around. It's not that I didn't learn a lot in both serving in government and then being elected once to this state's highest office, but people ask me what I took out of those experiences. I said, well, scar tissue. I mean, one thing which does come in handy in jobs like this one is an ability that I think one only acquires over time to recognize that criticism, sometimes untrue and unfair criticism, comes with any job of high responsibility. And after a number of experiences over a long period of time, I learned to shrug that off, at least most of the time. But I would say that the most valuable lessons I learned worked the other direction. They were learned in private life and applied to public.
So would you say that's something that you have to learn through experience to build that kind of ability to take that criticism, or is it something that you can work on before you get in those situations?
Well, I've encouraged, especially a lot of young people, to first of all, to seek positions wherever they are of high responsibility, but to recognize that a couple things about that. One is you ought not seek them unless you intend to make something better, unless you intend to make something change. And change always discomfits people and will give rise almost axiomatically to a criticism from people who either oppose the specific changes you want to make or just don't want to see anything change at all. And but I think it probably does have to come from experience. It certainly took me a long time to recognize that, first of all, especially in the communications environment we live in now, you just can't correct. You can't reach people who may have been told something untrue or unfair. And second, if you reach them, you may not be able to persuade them of that in the first place. So you just have to accept it as a cost of doing business. And but if the job you've done, the improvements perhaps you've been part of, are significant ones, the fulfillment of that really is what matters in the long term, and you will eventually forget those things that upset you or troubled you at the time.
Yeah.
So kind of bouncing off that question, in your time with working with people like George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, what are some criticism that you had learned from those experiences? How are they like with working with such renowned people, and what are some skills you got out of that position?
I was very fortunate there, and in other walks of life too, just remarkably fortunate to work for or in close proximity to some very able and successful leaders. I would say the two people you mentioned, I would start with character. People might have disagreed with decisions they made, but they were always, those decisions were always made out of principle, always made with integrity. You can't say that about everybody we've seen in either high public or private offices. Secondly, each of those two people thought about big goals, and I certainly internalized that and applied that. You know, when I had my one chance in elected office, we sought to make big changes that we thought were in the public interest and in the interest of all our citizens. We worked on them every single year, tried never to, as I used to say, 50 caliber, not BBs. And so I would say that the greatest leaders I've been around, first of all, never stood still and always were aiming at major goals and endeavors, and not miniature ones.
So you mentioned you've had a lot of tough decisions to make, especially in such large positions. Could you speak on how you're able to remain so calm and make tough decisions, especially under a lot of stress?
I'd love to tell you I was always calm. Probably there were occasions when I fell a little short of that. One thing is that if you put the mission first, or the institution, serving a very important institution here now, I think that's the starting point. The Marines used to have a motto they taught their officers: my mission, my men, myself. The order was important. First, the goal. Second, the people you work with and their interest in protecting them and supporting them. And yourself last. I think always keeping that focus in front of one is important. And over time, again, it may be something that is best learned or maybe only learned through experience. Taking a long view, things which seem very troubling, or something that seems like a crisis today, if you step back, if you've studied some history, it helps. You can see that it may not be quite the emergency, or at least the permanent crisis that it seems at the moment.
So it sounds like a lot of the decision-making process that you're kind of talking about and that you've learned from people you worked with is all about balancing the values of whatever decision you're making is surrounding and the values of the people around you, and then also balancing that with like the longer outlook of whatever the decision you're making, which is definitely cool to hear. I know a lot of definitely higher people with lots of power can make decisions based on their own outlook without taking that longer outlook. So that's an interesting point. As part of this podcast, we let some of our guests submit questions, and our ASME, Purdue ASME president, Sajan Seberg, asks, do you find it hard to balance personal opinion with what you think would be the better for the university?
I don't. It doesn't mean I don't have opinions. What it means is that I very often keep them to myself because I believe I have a paramount responsibility to the institution. I try, for instance, to practice and I don't think I've fallen short of this, often if at all, practice the rule, never to criticize either a Purdue faculty member or student. I may disagree strenuously with something they've said or done, but unless it's real misconduct, and we don't have much of that here, my job is to, I think, first of all, promote this institution wherever I can, and secondly, to be neutral on subjects where there will be, in a community of scholars as big as this one, there'll be wide spectrum of disagreement. And so on almost every occasion, I keep my own views to myself, and particularly if they're at odds with someone else who's here. My job is to be a cheerleader and a promoter of the interest of the institution. It's not and this, I think, is a rule of general application, that if you're privileged enough to hold a position of significant responsibility, it's not about you. And you need to make certain you never let it become about you.
That's very true and well said. I definitely am sure that it's hard to separate personal opinion from doing what's best for the university. And I'm sure you've gained many of those skills from your elected positions or working in the cabinet, things like that. How have those positions and experiences influenced your role as president here? And this is asked by our listener, Shayak Chatterjee.
Each of the things I've been lucky enough to do before has contributed, and probably a lot of times in ways that are subconscious that I don't even notice. I mean, I will say, I made mention earlier, many years that I spent in business were incredibly helpful and formative as I came to live in the public sector in my previous job, or the nonprofit sector as we operate here at Purdue. The experience in trying to get large numbers of people headed in a common direction, to be able to try to define a direction that was hopefully one that was motivating, and that large numbers of people could get enthusiastic about, because big change, big accomplishments almost never happen because of one person. They happen when large numbers of people align together and achieve something together. What the Purdue community achieved by staying open as we did throughout the whole COVID experience is a fresh example that I will always remember with a lot of gratification. And it took everybody, and most particularly our students, to do that. So that was something that I took out of business. The ability to make decisions, choose priorities, make ends meet, is something you have to, I think, learn and discipline yourself to do over time. And to be focused completely on results. I used to say, in business, the world measures you. Your sales go up or down, your market share goes up or down, your stock price, if you have one, goes up or down based on your results. And that's not necessarily true in government. People can get by with crummy service and lousy results, and to some extent that's been true in higher ed. And so I think that those lessons and the practice I had doing that in business, both small and larger, was enormously valuable to me.
So then, at Purdue in specific, as we all know, it's a heavily engineering school. We have lots of engineers here, and we've had lots of great engineers come out of here in the past. How does Purdue being so focused on engineering affect a lot of your decisions? Does it change how you approach being the president in any ways?
It was a major reason that I came here. We're more engineering and STEM centric now than we were when I got here, and that's all by design. It was perfectly obvious at the time that I was asked to take this job that success of a state, a nation, just people individually in in today's world is heavily dependent on technological skill and understanding. And I believe Purdue's moment, the moment of places like Purdue, has really arrived. So it was a very powerful attraction to me to come here. And one of the first things we did was start growing the engineering college. It was already big. Growing the engineering college, reforming what was then the College of Technology is now the Polytechnic Institute, and growing the computer science program and so forth. We're very proud of everything we teach at Purdue. And I hope engineers like you won't leave here without having read some great literature, studied some history, some economics, things you're going to need. They're very, very important. But the chance to build further a great STEM-centered institution was probably the single biggest attraction to me in agreeing to take the job.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, like also engineers having the opportunity to combine a lot of those different areas of study, like economics, politics. That's one of the things that really stood out to me in specific about Purdue is I'm actually in the integrated business and engineering program, the first year they're having it. And I just loved how Purdue had so many just opportunities for students to really broaden their studies and broaden what they were focusing on, as opposed to just being so delved into engineering.
And you've done a wonderful job, making the school one of the most well-ranked engineering programs in the nation. Why do you think that is? And also, how is Purdue such a competitive and prestigious school alongside many selective schools like Caltech, UC Berkeley that are ranked alongside of Purdue, yet we still have such a high acceptance rate? How do you manage prestigiousness without including exclusivity? And why do you think that you aren't including exclusivity?
Well, these are two questions, and they're both very, very important and central to our thinking. First of all, I didn't enhance our, certainly not our ranking in engineering. That's something that our faculty and the students we've attracted have done over time. I do believe that the recruitment of our Dean of Engineering here was one of the single most important moments in the decade that I've been here. He is spectacular in his own right and is a very good organizer, a recruiter in turn of other talent. And that's really where high ranking, if it's deserved, comes from. So the other question is a very important one, and I've confessed before, often, that when I first came here, I thought maybe the right course for Purdue was to continue becoming more selective. It had been in the previous 2 or 3 years, and not for bad reasons, not for negative reasons. Graduation rates still aren't where I'd like to see them, and they were not very good. And the idea was maybe by becoming more selective, we'd have fewer people come here and not succeed. It didn't take me very long to realize that was not the right answer for this school. We are a land-grant school. Our assignment from the very beginning has been to try to open the gates of higher education widely to people from all backgrounds. Remember when Purdue and schools like it were created, only a tiny percentage of American young people, and almost all of them were males, went to college at all. And so we have to stay true to that mission to democratize higher ed. But you don't have to sacrifice standards to do it. If I've done anything at all personally that might have contributed a little bit, it's to try to keep the notion of rigor in front of the Purdue community. One reason that we've had a strong reputation, and still do, is that it's not easy to get an ME degree here. That's pretty widely known. It's known by employers. Employers know that we don't hand out A's like Halloween candy at Purdue, and I hope we never do. And when y'all have graduated and the world is fighting for you, the companies are competing for your services, they're going to do so knowing that you have had to work to learn, and that you have learned more than maybe somebody from another school. So We have, to me, one of the most important things that's happened over the last decade is the school has grown substantially, and yet the quality of students who are coming here has gone up, not down, and I believe the quality of our graduates when they leave is at least as good as it's ever been.
So you mentioned democratizing education, and something I want to hear about a little bit is we were one of the first universities to establish a women in engineering program. What objectives or what ways is Purdue looking to continue to increase minority participation and women participation in engineering?
Every way we can. We have a host of special initiatives to recruit and to reach out and encourage, in some of the cases, encourage young people still in high school or middle school to look into STEM fields of study, engineering and others. And it's coming. It's coming more slowly. It's simply a fact of life that more young men, at present at least, seem to be attracted to the STEM fields. But I think it's changing, and it needs to, and we're doing what we can to encourage that. I'll tell you honestly that we work to make certain we lean in the direction of women and minorities as we extend our acceptances, and it's going to take a lot more extra effort. But I think societally it's changing so that more young women coming up see this as the more attractive way forward compared to what's been true historically.
Yeah, like building off of that a little bit, you mentioned like building STEM into some of our education programs earlier on. And I've definitely seen that in our society. Like I knew when I was younger, there were like almost no STEM programs until I was around middle school. And now I'm starting to see a lot of schools are introducing them. So I'm just very happy to hear that, because I know it takes time to really build something up like that in education. But I think focusing on the building blocks when you're younger and really getting into STEM is one way to really get kids excited about it and motivated to be at a school like Purdue.
Absolutely. Now, following up with that question regarding inclusivity, I was hoping you could provide some clarification on a passage in one of your open letters that was titled "Where Are All the Men?" and conflicting messages kind of stirred some controversy, and I was hoping you could provide some clarity on the intent of your words.
I'm happy to, but it shouldn't require any. There was nothing unclear about what I said. I was simply reporting facts, which are that the number of men on college campuses has been dwindling now for about 3 decades. This is the hottest topic probably in higher ed right now. I mean, within a couple weeks of my open letter, the Chronicle of Higher Education issued a 70-page report on this very subject. It's not a good thing that fewer and fewer young men are pursuing higher education in this country. And so some people, I'm going to choose a charitable explanation and say they innocently misunderstood words that were, I thought, pretty plain. You know, we continue, I just answered your question, we're doing all we can to recruit more women to STEM. But over 60% of those who apply to Purdue are men. Over 2/3 of those who apply to STEM disciplines are men. And so that's not anything we're doing intentionally. That's just presently what the preferences of young people are. It's not new. The fact that we are one of those schools which has somewhat more men than women is a function of that, not of anything that we intended, and we're trying hard to change it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have thought, just as the world has become more developed, that you would just see increasing numbers of not only men, but just women both and going into higher ed. So it's interesting to see that it's been dropping off in the past years.
Well, the good news is that women are still seeking higher education degrees, including STEM degrees, at very high rates. If there's a problem, it's on the other side. And so, somebody actually asked what this was about male recruitment. We don't have any programs in male recruitment. We have a couple dozen programs to recruit females, and we'll continue with those.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also, just like we just were talking about, roots back to when you're younger and when people are starting to just get into STEM. And like even for myself as a freshman, like it was like 10 years ago when I was studying, I was younger, and there was just like nothing surrounding STEM, and I can see why those roots can have effect, causing like less women and just less involvement in STEM, and how that just takes time once STEM is integrated into a lot of schools, a lot of middle schools, a lot of elementary schools even, to really see that improvement in the future.
No, I mean, I'm not sure why one gender is drawn to one pursuit more than another. But for the moment, it's a fact of life. I mean, the vast majority of our veterinary applicants are females. Our vet school is 70-some%, maybe 80% female. That's not by Purdue's choice. That's by the choice of those who, seek to come here. That's true of certain other colleges too. It just happens to be different in engineering and a couple other of the STEM colleges.
So then, kind of wrapping things up, what vision do you have for Purdue over the next coming years? Are there any big goals, not even just for Purdue, maybe even yourself, that you're looking to accomplish?
Well, leave me out of it, but Purdue, I look forward, first of all, to the continued growth and flourishing of the community that around Purdue. We've done a lot we've created this innovation district here, trying to attract major businesses, mainly STEM-based businesses, where our students can, in addition to their studies, have close-at-hand internships and maybe jobs right out of school. The people that we're trying to attract, whether it's businesses or just talented individuals to that district, I want to see an increasingly vibrant, attractive, cool place to be. Why? Because we want to attract the best minds in the country, the best faculty, to all our colleges. And so I don't know how you could miss a lot of the growth and development that is happening around the school. That's certainly a big part of it. Secondly, I would say I do envision Purdue continuing to lead in adapting the way we teach to the age in which we live. And I'm not sure, I don't claim to have all the answers here, but we're pretty sure that more so-called experiential learning will be a part of it. That is to say, more hands-on, more, where possible, work experience mixed in with the field of study. Now, the engineering college has had a co-op program for 60, I think, plus years. That's a terrific sort of prototype for what I think ought to be not just maybe 10% of our engineering students, but maybe every student here in one way or another.
That's absolutely true. And even like the amount of research opportunities, there's a plethora of extracurriculars that students can get involved with. And especially me as a mechanical engineer myself, I can definitely attest to the fact of a collaborative environment that Purdue seeks to create, especially with other people, definitely helps me learn better, especially in an environment where I can have a lot of hands-on opportunities, similar to the Polytech Institute.
Yeah.
There's so many places for you to grow as a student.
Especially, I don't know if we've mentioned it, but the EPICS program for incoming freshmen, I think that's a big thing. And I really love how that's structured. I don't know how specific you know about it, but like each class we kind of go over what we ask a question and students respond, how they've been growing and learning. And I think it's really helpful for students to get that hands-on experience, especially early on.
Yeah, there's another great example of things that are not new to Purdue, but I think are going to have to become much more a part of higher ed generally if it's going to continue to attract people who now have all kinds of other options. You can learn things that in other ways online and so forth, from other places other than traditional colleges, which will allow a young person to land a good job, get off to a good start in life. And for places like ours to remain relevant, keep attracting the number of students that we have, we'd better become even better at extracurricular experiences, and especially hands-on experiences that are related to the field of study.
Yeah, it's so great to hear about all the effort that's being pushed towards that hands-on experience, especially in the coming years. So President Daniels, on behalf of the entire Purdue American Society of Mechanical Engineering organization, we would like to say thank you for joining us on today's episode. We couldn't appreciate more hearing about your experiences, opinions, and where you look to take Purdue in the coming years. So thanks so much for joining us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you really enjoyed our talk with President Mitch Daniels as much as we did. Feel free to check out the timestamps for the various topics we covered today. And for more personal development tips, check out Liam's own podcast, The Expedition Success. If you have any feedback, guest requests, comments, or any other inquiries, please contact us at asme.podcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form link below. We would also love to connect with you on LinkedIn, so definitely check out those links in the description below. We'll catch you guys in the next episode, and thanks so much for stopping by.